Hello and welcome to the Product Opscast with Graham Reed and Antonia Landy. Welcome, Antonia. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for asking.
Good stuff. Today on the show, we are joined by Anthony Maggio, VP of Product at Airtable. And in case nobody in the entire world already knew, my absolute favorite platform right now. So this is a personal thrill to have you on the show today, Anthony.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Fabulous. Anthony, tell us a little bit about yourself and in your background.
Great. Yeah. So I'm Anthony. I lead the product management team at Airtable. Sounds like maybe many of your guests are already somewhat familiar with Airtable, but for anyone who's not, Airtable is a no code platform that makes it really easy to build applications with embedded AI. And product ops and product management solutions are a big area of focus for us as a platform. In terms of myself, I've been at the company for about 5 years, based in San Francisco in our headquarters, and I've spent my entire career, 15 years in product management and product roles. So have seen the evolution of product operations and the industry, and many waves of disruption and change. Now a lot of focus, obviously, on AI and how to bring AI into our products, into our workflows, and excited to chat with you about that today.
Fabulous. Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, absolutely. So, today for our audience today, we are going to kind of cover two things, two areas. Certainly going to hear about the innovations that, Airtable are working on, particularly when it comes to product ops and in the AI space for sure. But first, I'd love to, as we were talking, I think it was last week, from your perspective, some of the organizations that you're working with, and how are you seeing it, product operations being implemented, from some of those global recognizable names down to the smallest or smaller organizations and everything in between? Because I think that's a really, really interesting thing about how is product operations being done, across the vast array of different businesses out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the most fun things about my job is that I get to spend a lot of my time with fellow product leaders and product ops leaders and see kind of bits and pieces of what does product operations look like at companies across the spectrum. But actually, just to rewind a little bit and to share how we became so invested in product operations solutions, about 3 years ago, Airtable started thinking about how do we evolve beyond just a purely like horizontal product and platform, and how do we start to develop some more focused solutions around specific types of personas and functions. And around that time, we looked at all of our signups, all of our usage, where were we seeing traction amongst customers in our self-serve business and our enterprise business. And product operations was actually one of the biggest areas that we just saw organic usage, and really across the spectrum. So everything, like you said, from fast growing like Silicon Valley startups to some of the iconic brands in Silicon Valley, like companies like OpenAI and Airbnb, all the way up to really large enterprise organizations like the Amazons and Walmarts, of the world that were using us for that use case. And so that was a big motivator for us to start really focusing on and investing in more concerted products and capabilities to support product management, product operations, workflows. I think the other thing that was really interesting about this particular category for us is that it evolved, and we saw a lot of companies actually coming to us for product operations outside of what you would traditionally consider technology companies. And I think it was you all know this as well, being like in the space, but it was a big realization for us that really like every company is becoming a digital product company in some way. And as we looked at our pipeline and looked at the opportunities and types of enterprises that we were engaging with, around product operations use cases, they weren't necessarily all companies you would think of as being digital product companies. We have a customer, a large customer that's in like HVAC manufacturing, right? And they're they're a huge digital product team, lots of digital product use cases, because now like every device is being built with a Internet of Things connected, device approach and strategy. And so the digital product has become just a huge part of the core, consumer experience. So that's one of the reasons why we've been really excited about this category, why, we see so much usage and adoption of Airtable in this space. And then, I think in terms of where like Airtable comes in and why we've been a good fit, because while it is true that every company is becoming a digital product company, what product operations actually looks like in every company is very different, right? You all know this probably better than anyone, but the actual workflows that your teams need to manage if you're building a software product versus a hardware product versus a connected, device versus we even see like a lot of like physical like clothing products, like things like that. The processes look like very different, right, across those spectrums. And so, our goal has been to be the most flexible platform that really allows any customer build a solution that is molded around their workflow rather than trying to convince you to adopt a point of view or workflow that the software has baked in.
Amazing. So much to pick up there. I think one of the interesting things that you mentioned there is, the role of product management and those common tools in industries that are not just software. We come from, product management is very, very baked into software side of things, but actually product management in other, let's call it non-traditional areas. And I'm saying that with a slight tongue in cheek because actually they were product managers years and years ago before software was the biggest thing in the planet. So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on this, right? Like I'm actually seeing something very similar in my client base. Like I started out with very much digital first, tech first, startups, scale ups, but as the remit gets bigger, and I think as product operations as a concept gets more understood and is more widely disseminated, I've worked with energy companies, I've worked with pharma companies. Like these are companies that you wouldn't traditionally think of having a digital component, but they have strong product teams who need to learn how to be more effective and who need the tools and practices and systems, just as a company whose product is an app, right? Or is a SaaS software. Yeah. So it's very interesting that you're seeing that too.
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to ask you is that apart from seeing the differences in all of the companies who are starting to think about product operations, is there actually a difference in European product ops and American product ops?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if I'm qualified to, answer to answer that question, but I think, maybe to back out of it like a little bit more broadly, I think, like the whole product operations like function is still relatively nascent, right? Like I think if you look at what is product operations like at 5 different companies, you'll see like 5 different kind of specs for the role. So I don't know that I could draw like any commonalities yet across like U.S. versus European product operations, but certainly wide spectrum of what we see that kind of role and function being responsible for across different types of businesses and sizes of businesses. I think coming back to your last point though, I think like one interesting dimension that that we've seen is that it's not only the digital products that are becoming, where we're seeing a growth of product operations. I think obviously there's one kind of piece of the growth is every type of business, like you mentioned, energy companies, financial services companies, pharma, that are building digital products, that digital is becoming like a bigger and bigger part of their workflows, that or of their business, of their consumer experience. But I think the other interesting dimension that I've seen is actually a lot of the best practices of software development coming into other industries and coming into other adjacencies. So, when I work with companies that are actually manufacturing or building like physical products, or starting to even to think about like the go-to-market processes. How do we market, or how do we, merchandise like some of our products? We're starting to see a lot of the same patterns and ways of working and workflows that have traditionally been software development workflows moving into some of those categories as well. So, I think that is the other dimension where you start to see like product operations type roles, even if they're not that role, in title, that are emerging, in these adjacent categories or in adjacent kind of personas within an enterprise.
I love it. I mean, we've stolen Kanban from manufacturing, so now it's just going full circle again.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Have you worked with, or in both your capacities, for a business that doesn't have a digital footprint, a digital, what we all know as software? We've talked about hardware. Antonio, you said about kind of working for energy companies, pharma companies. Would it if I was to assume that actually those organizations still have a digital element to it, whether it's an e-commerce piece, whether it's a front end or something like that, or actually have any of those organizations had nothing digital at all? It's all been very physical product related.
We definitely do, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find a company at this point that doesn't have any digital presence, right? Like every like company is going to have like some type of digital experience. But I think like what I was speaking to in terms of the kind of product operations piece, we definitely see a lot of solutions that Airtable provides that are not, I wouldn't classify as digital product operations. Like if you just take the example of think about like a consumer packaged good, like maybe a company that is, that is creating like some type of home care product or some type of, food, like packaged food product, right? What is the process to actually build that product, to merchandise it, to bring it to market, to get it into all of your different like distribution channels, to prepare the right labels and promotions and advertising for Amazon and for Walmart and for Target, and like every one of those different stores is going to require like a slightly different spec and different sizes of their promotional like content and whatnot. So that's actually more what I was referencing, where we see these workflows that they're definitely part of a product supply chain, right? The supply chain being kind of new product, new version, new, et cetera, and getting it from conception all the way like into the hands of consumers. And a lot of roles are, we're seeing like emerging around those workflows that look very much like a software product operations role. Right? The role that those people are playing, they might come from like a different background or different type of title, but they're starting to bring a lot of the, kind of digital and agile like practices into those types of workflows and organizations. And, like when you like zoom out and look at the actual like processes there, like there's a lot of commonality, like even in the way that we like build software, right? Like you're at some level, you're like trying to solve a problem like for a customer, and you're trying to understand what are the feature sets, what are the kind of capabilities that we can bring to that customer that are going to deliver like maximal value. And whether you're building software or whether you're building laundry detergent, right? The actual kind of workflow of going through those steps and identifying like, how do we do customer research? How do we find, what is going to most resonate like with the market right now? How do we build our feature set and our messaging like around that? How do we think about, distribution and kind of getting it out, through a sales team or through web experiences or whatnot? There's a lot of commonality actually in those workflows, even across like very, very different types of products.
Yeah, I think for me, so I have actually worked with companies who had no digital customer facing product or component, but those were companies that built internal tools to enable their own workforce. Right. And I think that's where it gets really, really interesting, and where the concept of product operations also has to become much more flexible to account for both the internal teams and those internal tools, and the discovery and improvement and iteration of those digital tools, and then also look outwards to how those tools will then enable whatever the company's outward facing product actually is.
Absolutely. And I think that is a great segue into like AI as well, right? Because now that's where, we are seeing like the most both current opportunity and the most impact like from AI is around those like internal tools and workflows. How do you start to look at every step of that supply chain that it takes to to build your physical or digital products, and look at opportunities where AI can automate or augment or cut down like the manual work like involved in, in every step of like bringing those products to market.
It's really interesting, actually, isn't it? Because I mean, firstly, there's a big statement that we've made here is that actually product operations, regardless of its name, is conceptually suitable for any business, within reason. The same very, very similar workflows. If you are a business that is selling a product of some description, whether it be physical, digital, service, actually, there are very, very similar workflows that you're going through. Part one. Part two, absolutely. Very, very few organizations will have no digital presence at all. Even if they are just a website, where I work at the moment, our digital footprint, our whole software team is the e-commerce website on the front. It's a relatively small part. critical part because we're an online pharmacy, but it is a very small part of our overall operation. So very interesting there. And AI also really interesting as well, because when we are then looking at those internal tools, as Antonio, absolutely rightly said, we are in a world in 2025 now. We are looking at absolutely everything we can do to be as efficient as possible, whether it be true AI, whether it just be automations, whether it be integrations, whatever we want to do. What elements of our supply chain can we reduce down to, so it doesn't need or needs very little human input? So very, very, very interesting there. And it's absolutely a great segue, to then start thinking about what have you started to see, in the AI space, Anthony, whether that be, what you're playing with internally to Airtable or externally, what interesting things have you started to see?
Yeah, so a lot. I mean, we can unpack this and kind of go into a few different dimensions, but just to kind of back up a little bit in terms of where we are in terms of like the AI like product evolution. So Airtable started building AI features like, into our platform about 2 years ago. We now have two kind of major areas of AI capabilities within the platform. Omni, which is actually Airtable's own agent that can help you build workflows, build applications on the platform, and then also answer questions about your data in the platform. So from a easy product use case, you have an exec who wants to know, hey, when's like this feature shipping? Now they can just kind of ask a natural language question and get an answer, to that rather than sifting through roadmap, lines or dashboards or whatnot. And then the other area is what we call our kind of AI at runtime products. And what those products are essentially custom agents that our users can build and embed within their workflows. So we call those field agents. A field agent can, really kind of take any task within your database or within your application and start to automate those tasks, whether that is performing research on a product or a company or a competitor, whether that's drafting content like writing a PRD or summarizing status updates, or things like kind of triaging, categorizing work. Now we're focused on building kind of many new tools and capabilities for those agents. We launched an image generation agent recently that can either generate or edit images. A lot of the consumer product workflows we were just talking about. You build a campaign image and you need to kind of swap out products like in different geographies, right? So that would be kind of another agentic use case. So those kind of like being the two like broad categories of where we've invested in in the platform side. In terms of the customer side and like where we're seeing these deployed, I think there's been a big shift that I've seen like over the last 2 years, where I think the early stages of AI adoption were predominantly predominantly kind of easy efficiency add-ons is how I would, categorize them. It's like, okay, we've got like a bunch of like feedback data coming in. We're going to summarize that data. Cool. We're going to have our PMs like draft their product requirements docs in like ChatGPT. Those are sort of like helpful like efficiency gains for like each individual, for each user. But I think the big shift that we've really seen like over the last year and with a lot of these new agentic capabilities is kind of a change in thinking from how do I enable each person to be individually more efficient, to now focusing on how do we build agents that can actually automate recurring workflows. And those workflows might be things like, how do we prepare for a product release? How do we run security reviews? How do we automate our kind of legal like risk analysis process? How do we auto draft our support content or support documentation or educational content, for every new product that we're creating or building. And I think that is like a big change in thinking. It requires like a different skill set, because phase one of just like, okay, like we want to gain marginal productivity, kind of just give people tools and say, hey, go figure out how to use these tools. Building agents, I think, actually looks a little bit more like a kind of product management role, right? You actually have to understand like, what's the problem we're going to solve? What's the context that I need to give to to this agent to be able to solve it? What are the tools they need access to? How do I, kind of orchestrate like the workflow in the right place and make sure it's serving like all the different kind of user needs? And I think, one of the really cool things for your audience is that I think product operations as a practice is actually probably one of the best functions to become agent builders across a business. It's really like anyone in an operational function whose role already is to understand like what are all of the business workflows, what are the tools that are going to make them more efficient, how do we up level like the output of our entire teams. And so what I've personally seen is that those types of roles, whether they're product operations, marketing operations, go to market like operations, those are the folks who are really coming up with the best agentic use cases and who are building some of the best agents that we've seen across our customer base.
It's amazing. I clearly haven't checked in with Airtable in a few years because I remember using it when it was quote unquote just a relational database. And it's shot to the moon since then. This is amazing. I would love to learn more. What's the most common agentic use case you've seen? And what's the one that kind of blew your mind? Like, what's the one that you remember sticking out?
Yeah. So I'll talk about like a few in product to start, and then we can, kind of go into like some of the, some of the more like mind blowing ones that I've seen. So, I think like within product, the most common ones that we're seeing right now are around kind of customer and competitive intelligence. So, if you're like a product manager, a big part of your role is understanding your customer feedback, understanding like the voice of the customer at scale, as well as like what are your competitors doing in this space. That's just a perfect, use case for an agent to automate because it's not a one-off thing, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to go analyze my customer feedback once and then I'm done. It's a recurring process. I get Airtable. I think the last time I checked, we get about 2,500 like feature requests per week across like all of our different channels and community and support, like support tickets are recorded like calls that we do with customers. So really kind of like large volume, right? Very like live workflow. And we have internally, so we have agents that will look at every one of those sources, every support ticket, every community forum post. And for recorded calls, we actually have kind of a separate application that will look at each call that comes in, analyze the transcript, and we'll actually pull out things that are frustrations, that are feature requests, that are, praise, that are complaints, like different kind of categories of mentions like in that call. And we'll log those all individually in a customer feedback database. And then I think, what becomes like really interesting is you can apply agents on top of that to turn it from like a reactive process into a proactive, workflow. So it's not just, okay, the data gets logged in a database and like people go look at it. You actually can build email like automations on top of that to say, okay, like once a week, PM for this product area is going to get a digest of everything that's being said like in their area. What is the, live, like what's the customer, what are the themes that you're hearing? What are maybe the top complaints or like feedback issues? And like one click, add those ideas or some of those capabilities like to your roadmap. So that is one like really common pattern. Looks a little different, in every company, depending on where your feedback's coming from or where your, insights coming from. Is it like B2B? Is it B2C? Are you like more survey and like NPS driven? Are you, getting more feedback from your sales and customer support teams? But that pattern, I would say like holds true across many of the, the kind of product use cases that we'd see. And then I'd say like the second one that is really common is really anything around like documentation or translation of work. So translation of work would be, hey, I just wrote my PRD. Now I need to go break it into Jira epics and tickets, right? AI is great at doing this. It's very simple now to build an agent that can just look at a PRD, look at the context of like that PRD, draft your user stories for you, like off of that. And so we're seeing a lot of those types of custom agents deployed. And I think that, for that use case, the customization of the agent is actually really important because every company writes user stories like a little bit differently. Everybody has like different altitudes at which you might create an epic versus a ticket versus initiative, whatnot. So it's a great place that we see, a great use case we see for custom agents. So in terms of like the most mind-blowing, I've seen a lot of really like mind-blowing use cases for AI. I think like some of the recent ones that has stood out from Airtable customers, we saw a really large like media agency start to actually use AI and agents to automate a huge chunk of their like campaign planning workflows. So really kind of think about like being able to just from identifying like an audience and a product that you're looking to market, build an entire plan and say, what are the different channels we're going to target? How long are we going to run, ads like on these channels? How do we allocate budget like across these channels? So like pretty involved, workflow that was fairly mind blowing for me to see and kind of get a demo of. And then another one, I think that has been really interesting to follow is a lot of these image editing and image workflow. I think that the common like theme that we see around them is that for creative teams, it is there's a lot of work that is not very fun as part of the creative process. So yes, like the fun part of the creative work is coming up with the early like campaign ideas and brainstorms and like getting to like a really novel and unique idea for a campaign. What is less fun is having like a designer in your creative team sit down and translate that campaign into 90 different, regional localizations and figuring out like, hey, which product assortment do we carry in Germany versus Italy, versus like the UK, and we need the right like images in each one of those pieces of content. And so we've started to see a lot of solutions, a lot of our customers building solutions around those types of workflows with our image editing capability. And I think, there is just something really mind blowing about seeing an agent kind of look at a campaign and in a few minutes, like instantly localize it across like 90 different regions, like come up with new translated content, new like product assortments. Like you can just, I think it's one of the most, it's sort of when you watch that happen, it's very easy to internalize like, wow, this must have taken somebody weeks to do, manually. And it was not a very fun process.
Of that. I actually, when you started talking, I immediately went research repository. But you're right in that I think most of the AI implementations, at least organizationally, internally nowadays, are really just about either one-offs or, it's the summarization or it's the how do I use ChatGPT for XYZ. And I think the agentic AI models are really pushing it a step further. Graham.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think, basically every company like said some version of, okay, we need an AI strategy. We're going to go give all our
Right.
employees Copilot. We're going to give everyone ChatGPT. Good luck. Go figure it out. Right. And I think, that was like still a good thing to do, obviously. Like there are like huge productivity gains from using Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, like on a regular basis. I don't think anyone would argue with that. But they're not really like compounding gains over time, right? They are reliant on like every person in the organization, like even just remembering when should I be using these tools, B, like getting good at them. And you've probably all seen this, that the difference between someone who, has like really gone and made themselves an AI native, right? Reaches for ChatGPT like hundreds of times a day, has like their own custom GPTs built out, has a library of like stored prompts that they built out, versus like a very casual user who maybe like talks to Chat GPT like a human. There's pretty big difference like in the output that you get like between those different, different modes. And I think that, that's really the kind of challenge of like a purely chat-based strategy, is that your total kind of productivity gains are really limited. And the difference, with agents is that you can start to kind of look at where are these recurring processes that a team is spending a lot of wasted time on. And then how do we build the right agents to automate those processes and workflows, whether that's a feedback management workflow, whether that's a review workflow, whether that's a preparing your product for launch type workflow. I think I would challenge that like any company, if you actually spent a day and sat down and kind of mapped out like what are the core workflows that consume time of our product teams, you'd actually find that you could automate at least like a few of those very quickly. And I think right now we have a challenge around a like imagination gap, right? Of just being able to
Mm.
identify like how do we start to thinking about those differently? How do we make the time to go analyze our work and our workflows like in that way? And then also, I think just a knowledge gap. I've been actually in many of these types of working sessions or on sites with our customers where we'll go through an exercise like this. We'll actually help them map out these end-to-end workflows. And a common challenge that I see is that I think, many people are actually just surprised at how good the current model capabilities are at being able to accomplish this type of work, like through a fairly, simple agent. We generally see a lot of skepticism of like, will it actually work that well? Or will it be able to do this like in our brand voice or in our format or in our, whatnot. And I think like there's a common pattern that I see is there's been like a lot of surprise and delight actually at how well some of these agents will work with just a couple hours.
I think I've absolutely loved hearing you talk about this, partly because you've broken it down very succinctly to, those constituent parts. And actually that speaks to my experience of doing a very, very similar project using, as it happens, using Airtable and the Airtable kind of agents in this respect. So the project that I've been building so far is what I call Newswire, which is basically to kind of go out to the marketplace, go out to the internet and say, hey, I got a bunch of questions. Tell me the latest news about the medications that we sell or our competitors. And actually then I want you to kind of then break that down into the various locations that we operate out of, currently the UK, the US, Germany, and bring me back what the latest news is on that. Why have I done that? Because actually I want to be able to provide that as a piece of information pushed to our internal staff rather than them going out and searching for all of this, even on a regular basis. Actually, you can just come to them and it's summarized. An interesting one thing that we did was I didn't really know which of the various AIs that you integrate, Airtable integrates with, would be the best one for this particular job. So I built agents for all of them and then let them run, see which seemed to be the best, test this with my product managers, and then actually summarize based upon all of those findings to bring back a combined summary of what have we gone out and found. Now, I'm self-confessed Luddite when it comes to AI. I am so behind the times in terms of just using it. I don't use GPTs on a daily, weekly, monthly basis for myself. My product managers do, and they're far ahead of me. But what has been really impressive is actually I did all of that in Airtable with no code, with no real effort put into it. I mean, the biggest effort I had to do, which is always the effort with this, is getting that prompting right, get the back end context right as well. And because it was built up in steps in a table, essentially, I can see it all working, at various stages along that workflow as well. So I can interrogate and kind of go, that piece isn't looking right. Or actually, how have I got from step to step to step so I can have confidence in that end result is actually what it says. If I'm going out to the market and saying, well, tell me what the latest news is on our medications in Germany, and if I'm not going to go out and look at all of those sources of research myself, I need that confidence that it's going through those very valid steps, and it's just doing it, and that's the piece that I'm most impressed with. In terms of those agents, and I've just been able to literally just point and click and get it done.
Yeah, and I think like what you said there is really important as well. Like the sort of the relatively like low effort and ease of building this. I think actually the biggest blocker that I see as I'm reflecting on this is that most people I interact with, I won't even say product ops, most people have this idea that it's really hard to build an agent. And they hear that term and they think like, I don't know, that sounds like pretty scary and technical. Like, I don't know how to code. Like, I'm not a developer. And I think, if there's one takeaway, like for anyone listening to this podcast, it should be that anyone can build an agent. If you've used Excel, like you can go build an agent. At least in Airtable, I'd say you can build a field agent very quickly and easily. And, this is something that you could test or try out like in minutes, not even like days or weeks. And I think that is a very common like misconception that I have heard, across every type of persona, I've engaged with across our customer base. So I think the best way, really to experiment with any of these kind of new products and workflows is just to get in and build them yourself, exactly like you did, Graham. Just find a problem like internally and challenge yourself to say, how could I go like stand up an agent to run this process like on a recurring basis?
It's fantastic. So I think I'm certainly very interested in seeing how these Airtable tools might help, me and my clients in the future. If there is a product ops manager or leader listening to this right now, what would be your advice in sort of getting started, sort of finding the one workflow or process that could benefit from the biggest uplift in agent automation?
Yeah, great question. So, we published something called Airtable AI Plays. And what these are, it's basically a catalog on our website of some of the most high impact use cases that we've seen across functions. You'll see them across like product, marketing, like legal operations, like various different workflows. Each one of these comes with a 2-minute demo video, so you can just see like what the actual workflow looks like. It comes with a template. Comes with some kind of getting started, content to actually like get this up and running. And I'd say like the best way to start is exactly what I was just sharing with Graham before. Like just go try it yourself. Like these are not difficult, heavy, like high implementation time workflows. Like these are all things that you can go try out like in a few minutes. And I think that the best way for anyone, really to start to think about where is going to be the best like impact or the highest impact in my business is just to try it themselves and get kind of familiar with the capabilities. What I generally see, and when I like show our prospects or clients, these demos or these plays around automating like customer feedback or competitor research or contract like operations, pulling data out of your like documents and contracts and whatnot, usually whatever I show them is actually not quite the right thing for their business or like for their function, but it inspires like an idea that is the right high impact use case, like in their unique, I think again, like just kind of getting familiar with the capabilities of an agent and how to structure the right context and the right prompt, how to give it access like to the right tools, playing with some of the different models that are available, like, like Graham referenced, like that's really the best way is just to kind of get hands on and start trying to.
I think what is so interesting about everything that we've kind of said in this kind of second segment here is just so akin to how product operations, most people approach product operations anyway, which is like, firstly, look, just get in and muck in and start finding out where those bottlenecks on your workflow are, understand your workflow, play it out, what could be improved upon. And secondly, kind of speaks to kind of Airtable as a whole. And I actually swear to the audience that this is not a giant Airtable, advert at all. Really not. The fact is, tool to support product, to support any part of the business, it is just open. It is very, build it as you need it to work. Unlike so many other platforms that, from a product and product ops perspective that we are all engaged with every day that are very, hey, look, this is all about the product manager's workflow. This is like Jira in terms of kind of handing it over to engineering. And then you are constrained by those ways of working, whether they are just because that's how that product wants you to work, or how it just ultimately does work at the end of the day. Even kind of products like, ClickUp, for example, be very customizable, but ultimately still, within those interfaces, within the way that they kind of want you to interact. And I think what Airtable has always offered me in the past year that I've kind of been using it is that ability to just say, hey, I want to build it my way. I want to approach this that's very unique to the business. I'm currently working on a project to build a business-wide OKR system, completely from scratch using Airtable, because I don't think there's anything on the market that's suitable for what we have. And no other sort of typical product manager or product operations platform would also give me that capability to do it, because it is unique to where I am. And once again, comes back to product operations being so unique to every single business that myself and Antonio and so many other professionals watching that go into and standing product operations up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that is the key. It's should be right now, I think, really like a call to action to anyone who's in this function, right? Because the product ops like role is so unique. Like you play like a very high leverage role to be able to understand what's important in your company, what's important in your business, where are the choke points across the different product teams, and other cross-functional teams, that you're supporting, and what are the highest leverage solutions that you can create or buy or put in place, like processes that you can put in place to, to solve for those. I think in many ways that's like the crux of the role. And it should be like right now, just like a really, really, really fun time for anyone in this type of role, because you just got this like massive new tool set, this massive new like technology, these superpowers that, weren't available just a couple years ago. And by the way, they're getting like better and better and better every single day, that now just give you like the ability to create these really amazing solutions that were never before possible. But I think again, like the challenge in that is that no one else is probably going to come like show you exactly how to do that. No one's going to come like force you to, to go do that. Maybe, we're starting to see some of that and like some of the more, kind of like highest velocity, like AI native companies where they have put that kind of mandate on, the product operations team. But in a lot of places, I think you got to go, you got to go do it yourself. It's most likely that the people that you work for or that you report to like also don't totally know like how this stuff's going to work, right? They've never built like agents themselves either, right? So I think it should be like a really fun and empowering time to be in the product operations space, because you have a lot of leverage and a lot of opportunity to go, really start solving like some of your company's problems in really novel ways.
Yeah, I think creativity is really going to become almost like a core skill for this, right? And instead, like, I think we need to stop thinking about how can we do what we do today faster and start thinking about how can we get to the end result in a completely new and much more frictionless way.
Totally. And I think actually, one thing I have seen, it just reminded me that has been, pretty interesting, like in this area, is that a lot of the people who I've seen have created the highest impact solutions are oftentimes the newest and the least senior, like in the organization.
Interesting.
It's like the new grads, like coming right out of school. It's folks who are maybe kind of joining as like a first job or first time like in product operations. And a lot of these like people they have started sort of thinking differently, like in terms of the capabilities of AI and and agents. And they're coming in and saying like exactly like you just said, Antonia, like how do we do this like most efficiently from point A to point B? And it's probably not, standing up a recurring meeting with 15 like people or 20 people, to go talk about this thing like every week. There's actually probably like a much faster and like, more intelligent way to, to achieve like whatever outcome we're looking to. And so I think that has actually been really interesting to see that a lot of the, the really kind of novel like use cases and workflows that we're seeing emerge like across companies, actually like across functions as well, have oftentimes been kind of built out by very much like bottoms up.
I mean, listen, fresh eyes and no baggage. I think that's the
Yeah,
golden
exactly.
ticket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're almost at time for this episode. I'd love to just kind of just look to the future a little bit, Anthony, and say, look, is there anything you can share about kind of what's coming, kind of 6 to 12 months, particularly kind of with your AI tools? What's the direction of travel that you're heading on there? That hopefully our audience of product ops people can look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's hard for anyone to predict the future 6 to 12
Yeah,
months
yeah.
in advance, now. We could probably do a whole nother episode on how we've actually had to, throw away and change our like entire planning cadences and move everything into, kind of 2 to 6 week sprints just to be able to keep up with the kind of pace of change. But what I can say broadly is that Airtable like agents, field agents are a huge area of investment for us. We are bringing new tools to field agents really almost every week. So new integrations, new, kind of capabilities that the agents will be able to draw from and access and output. So I mentioned image editing, image gen. We're working on like video right now as well to be able to edit and create like videos based on your content. We've got some like really exciting work happening around prototype generation. So you could auto generate prototypes of like every item on your backlog on your roadmap, or kind of output websites and prototypes for different forms of content. Also, more kind of new and novel integrations with engineering tools like Jira and ADO that will be able to function a little bit more like agentically. So less of a deterministic automation and more, hey, go like find the right content like for me, in our Jira backlog, and tell me kind of what's going on with that, right? So that broadly, like what you'll see over the next like 6 to 12 months is Airtable field agents gaining many new skills and tools on a very regular basis, and a lot of that is just being driven by the use cases that we're seeing from our customers out in the wild.
Fabulous. And does that, this is, I'm playing devil's advocate here, so forgive me, but does that mean that there's going to be less of us, or you're moving away slightly from kind of this no code app solution that you have been over the kind of the past 4 or 5 years? Or is this kind of just one tangent that in terms of AI that you're investing in?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, I think AI has just been an accelerant to our mission. Like Airtable's mission has always been to democratize software creation, and it's becoming easier and easier to do that with AI. Actually, like another major area we just released in beta, so it's out now, is our custom interface generation, where you can actually generate like a fully bespoke UI on top of your Airtable data. So, if you've used like a vibe coding tool, like a Lovable or Bolt, like very similar experience, but built on top of your structured like Airtable, relational database. And we're seeing our customers come up with like some really interesting visualizations of their product data or workflow data, things like scenario planning, cut line management, whatnot, that they've, I've heard multiple customers say, wow, like I've always had this UI like in my head, and I've never found, a product that was able to, to do it. And so now I just can go and create it myself, right? And I think you almost kind of like can't think of a more direct connection to the company mission, right, of democratizing software creation without code than that. That is like truly like allowing anyone to go create custom internal tools that really like succeed at achieving their problem or their job. So I don't see it in any way as it's moving away from Airtable's core. We are still very much building for a no-code audience. We are really just up-leveling the ceiling of possibilities of what you can create without code.
That's music to my ears. That I've been waiting for that kind of custom interface builder for a while now, and I was like, yes, there's a few that I need right now. So that's absolutely fantastic. Antonio, any final words from yourself before we end today?
No, I think, I think it goes back to this looking at your organization and the way you build products with fresh eyes. That's going to be the determining factor in how successful you are at meaningfully becoming more effective, right? It's for a long time, it's been how can we get faster? But now it's really becoming how can we do things in a more smarter way? And yeah, I'm really excited to see the democratization of agents as well.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Absolutely fantastic time for us to end today. I would like to thank our very special guest, Anthony Maggio, for everything that you have shared today. As I said right at the very beginning, very personal moment for myself to have you on the show. There was a link to the Airtable AI plays, which again we'll put on the screen about now, because I think that's really, really very interesting actually, that you're sharing some really great use cases. Here's some great stories, and you know what, you can just go and implement those. And to be honest, look, you know what, let's be fair. If you're not using Airtable, if you're watching, you're not using Airtable, I'm sure that actually those same concepts can be implemented in a variety of different ways as well. So it's a good source of inspiration. Do absolutely please connect with any of us on LinkedIn. And Anthony, just thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you. To everyone watching, Antonio and I will be back whenever we next record an episode. And we look forward to welcoming you on that next episode of the Product Opscast. Thank you very much.